doesn't dream of discovering nature's enigmas, uncovering its most beautiful mysteries and learning the secrets it has to tell us? To carry out this quest, we transport you away from the hustle and bustle of cities to the heart of Europe's most beautiful natural sites. To better appreciate these extraordinary landscapes, we'll be taking to the skies to explore some of the most incredible places on the old continent. Now all you have to do is listen carefully to the whispers of the wind and open your eyes to take in the sights. Off the Roads is an adventure where poetry meets environmentalism. Let yourself be taken away and explore these national parks and their unique and marvelous ecosystems. Today, we're off to Greece for an epic journey through the millennia. At the crossroads of science, art, and philosophy, this country made up of 9,000 islands is considered the cradle of Western civilization and is brimming with exceptional geological phenomena. Set course for a journey that promises to be mythical. "200 million years ago, in the center of the present-day Aegean Sea, the most celestial of land masses was born. At almost 3,000 meters above sea level, it's not the highest peak in Europe, but it's probably the most legendary. And while its ascent is not the most arduous, any walker who ventures there will find themselves exposed to the thunderbolts of the gods." Welcome to the footpaths of Mount Olympus. Here we are in the heart of the Massif with the same name, the first of Greece's 24 national parks. Steep ravines, lush forests, and alpine tundra intermingle to give travelers a mountain of 1,000 faces. Sculpted by rain and sea winds, this isolated massive tower, with cracks as deep as the scars of time, stands on the border between Macedonia and Thessaly. Among its 52 peaks, Mount Olympus is home to the second highest peak in the Balkans, the famous Mytikas, reaching a height of 2,918 meters. Having banished the Titans who once lived there, it was from here that Zeus ruled the realm of the living alongside Apollo, Aphrodite, Hermes, and Dionysus. This secret garden, perched in the clouds and invisible from below, was the source of the greatest myths of ancient Greece. So don't be surprised if, when you look up into the sky, you feel tiny compared to the invisible might of this mythology. Whoever sets foot on Mount Olympus cannot ignore the mystical atmosphere that pervades every natural element, from the rustling gusts of wind to the trickling of the smallest streams. Divine intervention seems to have blessed Mount Olympus with a host of microenvironments, giving rise to a flora and fauna unique in Europe. Here you're in Greece's first natural park, also classified as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve for its exceptional natural and cultural importance. The reserve covers an area of 37,000 hectares surrounding the massif and the foothills of the mountain. It is home to a rich flora of over 1,700 species, including rare orchids and some 20 varieties found nowhere else but on this mountain. The fauna is no exception, with some 40 species of mammals and 100 species of birds, 30 of which are protected. The Biosphere Reserve has a multifaceted role. Its mission is to preserve the existing environment by protecting natural landscapes, ecosystems, and species diversity, while at the same time ensuring ecological and sustainable economic and human development. But all this constitutes a fragile balance, threatening by increasingly erratic weather conditions. Fortunately, natural parks are committed to preserving this unique European fauna and flora. And if certain species were increasingly less present in certain parts of the continent, they tend to return to these protected areas. Before we begin our ascent, let's take a moment to observe the shifting clouds that almost constantly obscure the mythical peaks of Mount Olympus. This immaculate cotton-like scarf could be interpreted as a slightly mocking invitation from Mother Nature herself to come and discover what lies hidden high above. The Greeks believed that the gods slipped away to contemplate the world and feast away from the gaze of mortals. Hesiod, the great Olympian poet, recounts how Zeus would bring down thunderbolts on his enemies and anyone who got too close to the house of the gods. For many centuries, the Greeks didn't dare attempt the ascent for fear of incurring the gods' wrath. It was not until 1913 that the first ascent of the highest peak was recorded by a group of Swiss mountaineers led by a Greek wild goat hunter. Science, on the other hand, helps us to understand the origins of certain legends. If more than 2,000 lightning strikes a year are recorded on Mount Olympus, scientists explain this by the fact that it is a coastal mountain rising out of the sea, making it a veritable lightning magnet. It's also said that on this mountain, the temperature drops 1 degree for every 200 meters you walk towards the summit. Those who venture here will face a humid climate and snow most of the winter, and sometimes even in summer. On top of this, there's regular rainfall, including terribly unpredictable hailstorms. But first things first. Today's weather isn't good enough to attempt the climb, as the gods haven't yet given us permission to visit them. There's more to this mountain than its peaks. At the foot of Mount Olympus, a few kilometers from the Thermaic Gulf, we are in the town of Litochoro, the city of the gods. In the distance, we can make out the Priona Valley, which stretches along the eastern side and overlooks an impressive corridor of greenery, the Enipius Gorge. This gorge was formed when rising temperatures caused the glaciers still covering the sacred mountain to melt away. To understand this, we need to go back 1 million years and imagine that the melting ice created several streams, which in their flow transported a mass of finely crushed rock. Today, these sedimentary deposits from the periglacial period can be seen emerging from eroded landforms. Geologists call them alluvial fans. They are widespread throughout the foothills region, from the slopes to the sea, and represent a treasure trove of sedimentary archives for geologists around the world. At the edge of the path, we see a large mallow, also known as a mauve sylvestre. This hairy, perennial plant often indicates the proximity of a past or present habitat. There are indeed a few traces of human settlement in the midst of this abundant nature. The white dot we see, perched on the rounded edge of the mountain, is the monastery of Agios Dionysius. Built in the 11th century by Saint Dionysius of Halicarnassus on the ruins of an altar where Hellenes used to perform divine sacrifices. Today, the monks who live here enjoy a view that encompasses the entire southern massif. In 1943, the Byzantine building was burnt down by the Germans on suspicion of hiding members of the Greek resistance. Still undergoing renovation, the Dionysius Monastery is gradually regaining its former glory, and hikers have become accustomed to stopping here to recharge their batteries and take in the timeless views. The trail through the Enipius Gorge is part of Europe's longest hiking trail, the E4, which links Portugal to Cyprus. Every year, it attracts elite walkers who come to challenge Olympus. This is probably the greenest side of the mountain. Here, the scent of the undergrowth and its many species, the song of the birds perched on the branches, or the lapping of the streams sound like a fantastic natural orchestra. The gorge's seaward-facing position explains why this little Eden is so densely vegetated. In fact, this geographical advantage gives it a higher level of humidity and rainfall in the lower areas of the massif, as evidenced by the river that runs down the mountain from the peaks. Its source is over 1,000 meters above sea level. At that altitude, its temperature never exceeds 0 degrees Celsius, and it stays that refreshing all the way down. And yet, in this tranquil setting, it's hard to resist taking a dip. Translucent waters are home to a wide variety of underwater species. Zooplankton and phytoplankton are invisible to the naked eye, but you're in the right place for a glimpse of a kingfisher, recognizable by its small size and reddish turquoise feathers. We weren't lucky enough to spot one on our climb, but if you ever visit Mount Olympus, you might come across this bluish arrow flying along a stream in search of its underwater prey. The temperate climate and mild environment favor the development of the many trees and shrubs that populate the Priona Valley. Strawberry, sycamore, ash and maple trees provide hikers with delicious fragrances as well as the food resources needed by the wood's residents. Upstream, the river gradually transforms into waterfalls and natural pools, as magnificent as they are unexpected. Hidden behind the foliage that forms a natural screen, these aquatic reserves are an ideal meeting place for all the flying insects. It's a particularly popular spot for dragonflies, who enjoy tandem flights and sophisticated displays of courtship. It's not uncommon to see purple loosestrife growing on the shores, a herbaceous plant that forms long, spike-like purple flowers that are easy to recognize. Behind its elegant appearance, purple loosestrife is now considered an invasive plant in many parts of the world where it has been imported. In the lower part of the ravine, there's a wide variety of deciduous trees, but the dominant forest in the gorge is made up of conifers as the ascent progresses. The fine needles of the pine forest, all drenched in sunlight, give off an enchanting scent of resin. The first ones we find are the black pines. Recognizable by their yellowish-brown to gray, often cracked bark, this species adapts easily to chalky soils and is highly resistant to winter frosts and multiple diseases. Above a certain altitude, it gradually becomes replaced by the Bosnian pine, which grows in a zone known as the boreal forest. Here, at the very top of this sacred mountain, we find ourselves at the highest altitude forest in the Balkans, and in the whole of Europe. Like its cousin, the Bosnian pine adapts formidably to chalky soils, but is above all unrivaled in its robustness on these dry, almost water-starved slopes. These coniferous forests are an unlikely refuge for a huge number of migratory birds, which settle here for part of the year. Faced with long journeys, these birds stop along the way to regain their strength. The elimination of their natural habitats is a direct consequence of forestry and climate change in many parts of the world. This forces them to fly further and higher to find refuge, like here in this boreal forest. Like Icarus, who constantly pushes his limits and gets too close to the sun with his feather and wax wings, the hardship inflicted on these migratory birds is leading to the gradual extinction of many species. To the south of the mountain, far from the lush green Anipius Gorge, as you turn your gaze towards the Larissa region, a very different scene takes shape on Mount Olympus. The landscape seems to have changed. Between the impressive Kalogeros and Kristaki peaks, and above the Mavratsa ravine, the Bara Plateau spreads out and gives way to a more rocky, dull area, much quieter than the neighboring jagged ravines. In the midst of these vast expanses, a new, almost inaudible sound is heard by hikers. Here, only the sound of the wind accompanies the silence. Culminating at 2,350 meters, this desert plateau is composed of a very specific biome, that of the alpine tundra. You've probably heard of tundra in Alaska and Scandinavia, possibly Russia and Iceland, but now we're in Greece. The landscape here is in no way reminiscent of the Enipeus ecosystem. The only relief changes are a few alpine scree slopes here and slight rock crevices there. The dense, inviting vegetation of the Priona Valley, just on the other side of the slope, seems light years away. It's like being on another planet. Lichen, moss, sedges, and grasses create a lunar landscape. Opposite us, relief so smooth and free of vegetation that it offers a unique view of the landscape's layout. A few hardy plants that cover the bare ground are perfectly adapted to this cold area of Mount Olympus. Beneath our feet, the ground freezes deep for a large part of the year, and with the buildup of snow in winter, geological basins store moisture for the whole year. This phenomenon gives the landscape a unique character with the formation of shallow hollows formed by erosion. These are known as sinkholes. These circular reserves give the water in the soil and enable many endemic species, some of which date back to the Ice Age, to survive in a landscape that seems unfavorable at first glance. It's summer at the moment, but you have to imagine that on these plains, at an altitude of over 2,000 meters, the snow can remain on the ground for up to 9 months. To get a better idea, imagine powerful winds blowing relentlessly across Olympus. Sometimes the gusts are so violent they exceed 100 kilometers per hour. A divine blast that chills you to the bone and blows the snow off thick mounds, forming snow hills. Orchids are the most densely populated family of flowers in the national park, and virtually all the species are native to Mount Olympus. If they've managed to survive, it's because they've escaped the intensive farming areas that are replacing large natural meadows. These flowers, probably the most complex in the plant kingdom, are also bioindicators, providing information on the quality of the soil in which they grow. In sharp decline in Europe, orchids are disappearing for a number of reasons. Soil drying, the disappearance of open environments such as meadows and moors, early and systematic mowing, and pollinating insects which are becoming increasingly rare. However, in the heart of this nature reserve, and thanks to the preservation efforts of the national parks, orchids are gradually returning to the slopes of this divine mountain. To preserve the mountain's very soul, the Biosphere Reserve is divided into several zones to protect Mount Olympus over the long term. The central zone, an area protected by Greek law, is strictly regulated. Human activity is limited to actions in favor of biodiversity, such as pastoralism and research. Around this area, a buffer zone is created to mitigate external disturbance and pollution. Human activities are also controlled, and ecologically viable practices such as ecotourism are encouraged. The transition zone includes the surrounding towns and villages. Here, activities are geared towards sustainable development, and the local population is strongly encouraged to participate in land use planning decisions. On the other side of the sea, to the west, on the opposite slope to Litóchero, the relief has once again been shaped in an entirely different way. Beyond the vast alpine plateaus, more vertiginous landscapes tower over the charming region of Kokkinopoulos. It's easy to imagine that this land, where the Neum and Kariskini rivers once flowed, was one of the strongholds of Poseidon, Zeus's impetuous brother and god of the sea and oceans. Water was everywhere here, flowing in mighty streams as far north as the town of Petra, irrigating the valleys with the mountain's sacred waters. In summer, the Neum River becomes a dry bed, and the large river below is only supplied by tiny streams due to reduced snow cover. Three main paths cross this arid area, leading to the highest point of Mount Olympus. Around this dry slope stand the peaks of the four giants, Stephanie, Mytikas, Scala, and Skolio. The sight of these raw rocks, sculpted over millennia, razor-sharp and dominating the sky, is spectacular and a little terrifying, I must admit. It's easy to understand why the Greeks didn't dare approach these menacing peaks, where they risked incurring the wrath of the gods. Perhaps it was Poseidon, nicknamed Earthshaker, who in a fit of rage split the mountain in two at this point to preserve the gods' tranquility. In fact, the hiking trails bypass the Megala Kazania Cirque, a gigantic chasm 600 meters deep. Scientists agree that it was the Xerolaki torrent that swept away the mountain's missing volume in its fury. In the center of the cirque, we don't see the realm of Hades, god of the underworld, but a pile of rocky debris that tells us about the phenomenon known as gelifraction. These remnants of extreme cold help us to identify the principle of gelifraction that Olympus, like many other mountains, underwent. Rainwater infiltrated these porous limestone rocks. Following freeze cycles, the volume of water in the rock increased, exerting pressure within the rock mass and causing it to fragment into often angular debris. From this slope, solifluction phenomena are visible. The surface of the ground following a period of heat, when it was frozen or simply followed by heavy rain, has become water-laden, sliding down the side of the mountain and becoming a muddy material. The irregular ripples on the horizon are a direct indication of this. This seemingly unwelcoming environment is home to a number of species native to the Mount Olympus Natural Park. But to see them, you need to be extra careful, as these plant species grow in small pockets of earth in rocky areas or perch on large, inaccessible rocks. These species are a brilliant illustration of nature's resilience and fighting spirit in a hostile environment. Look up from the cracks and crevices, and you might see a chamois scampering across the ridges. Despite their unrivaling speed and agility, which enable them to survive on the ridges, chamois are faced with a scarcity of grassy soils at high altitude. It feeds mainly on dry grass and conifers and spends most of the year in the high mountain plateaus. In winter, these vast expanses are covered in snow, forcing them to migrate to the forests. These wild goats from Asia are reminiscent of satyrs, mythological creatures that are half man, half goat. With a little imagination, you can imagine these mischievous creatures striding along steep ridges alongside a few nymphs. Together, they formed the procession of Dionysius, god of wine and excess, who also resided on the summits of Mount Olympus. In mythology, Dionysius himself is said to have given vines to mankind. So it's no coincidence that the nature park boasts a renowned vineyard on its southern slopes. Between 400 and 600 meters above sea level, wine growers cultivate Chinomavro, an ancient grape variety emblematic of the region that grows right on the mountain and produces bluish-black grapes for internationally renowned red wines. To the northeast, Greece shares borders with Macedonia, Bulgaria, and Turkey. Some say that this region is as much Balkan as Mediterranean. Here on the Dion Plain, we find ourselves exposed to the Balkans, giving rise to a new evolution in the landscape. In ancient Greece, Dion was the sacred city of the Macedonians, who for almost 5 centuries held great festivities in honor of Zeus and the Muses at the foot of this immense mountain. Alexander the Great himself made sacrifices here in honor of the god of the heavens before setting off to conquer Asia. The Dion region is dotted with undergrowth. Enter them for a taste of the mystical aspect of this ascent. Even without being at the summit, you can already imagine the presence of the gods behind the green veil of this mossy forest. A veritable breeding ground for life, mosses colonize an incredible variety of surfaces. During and after their lifetime, they encourage the growth of plants larger than themselves, while providing a home for thousands of tiny living creatures such as tardigrades, nematodes, and springtails, all of which contribute to the forest's ecosystem balance. These purple petals, which don't quite blend into the green backdrop, are those of bitter chicory. Known since antiquity in Europe, this plant, renowned for its use as a food, seems to have found its place at the heart of this dense vegetation with its earthy amber scents. The most refined noses will detect scents of thyme, rosemary, and even wild mint dotting the undergrowth. Of course, when you're on Mount Olympus, you tend to look up to see the mountain peaks. But if you look down, you'll spot a huge variety of wildflowers and butterflies that come to feed. In the midst of this abundant flora, it's easy to imagine Artemis, goddess of nature, secretly observing mortals who approach her kingdom. The many streams rising from the peaks have long irrigated this great fertile plain. The Eurapi, Agia Choris, and Agia Triada rivers, but above all the Orlias River, continue to flow through the ravines of the northern slopes. The Orlias Canyon winds along the mountain for over 2 kilometers, its walls sometimes exceeding 30 meters in height. The canyon's crystal-clear waters spill over 25 vigorously flowing waterfalls and form numerous turquoise-blue natural pools, enchanting travelers who stroll through them. The 2 most impressive waterfalls are Orlias and Orpheus. Orlias derives its etymology from a Greek verb meaning to make a lot of noise, as the sound of the waterfall crashing into the water mirror echoes throughout the forest. Along these wet arteries, the runoff has formed long, dry arms, which can be seen as braids drawn through the limestone mounds. The rock has crumbled over time to better slide down the slope, and the landscape looks oceanic with these limestone flows. When viewed from above, they evoke waves rippling across the Earth's surface. Here, geology reveals a new facet, crumbly and shifting, reminding us that the mountain is alive. Willows and plane trees have taken root in these characteristic soils, alternating with evergreen deciduous species such as strawberry, cedar, and laurel. A little further, great oak trees are firmly rooted in the soil of Olympus. It was in one of these majestic trees that Zeus was hidden for part of his childhood. His father, the Titan Kronos, feared the prophecy that he would father his own arch-rival. To break the prophecy, he swallowed his first 5 children as soon as they were born. To save one of his sons from this fate, Rhea exchanged her last-born for a swaddled stone and hid her newborn in a great oak tree. Since then, the oak has become a symbol of the god of Olympus, along with the eagle and the thunderbolt, and is also known for being one of the most resistant trees to the recurrent fires that Greece has had to contend with over the last 10 years. Every summer, record temperatures and long heat waves sweep across the plains and fields abandoned by the rural exodus, giving rise to numerous forest fires. Greece is highly prone to wildfire and lost more than 100,000 hectares in the summer of 2021. The heat waves of summer 2022 continued to devastate the rare flora and fauna that have been preserved until then. Although faced with a cruel lack of resources, Greece's strategy for protecting its territory includes the use of oak trees, as well as multiple artificial reforestation projects. Almost above the clouds, the Muses Plateau rises to 2,250 meters. Named after the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, goddess of memory. The Muses are their 9 daughters. Fantasy characters from Greek mythology, they have been an inexhaustible source of inspiration for artists since antiquity. Like these divine creatures, the Plateau of the Muses is a peaceful, harmonious place, while the sharp, chiseled edges of the sacred mountain peaks rise in the background. The highest chapel in the Orthodox world, that of the prophet Elijah, dominates the plateau a few meters above sea level. Built from the stones that surround it, it is as humble as it is tiny. To go any higher, you need gloves, hats, and suitable clothing, and woe to those who let themselves be seduced by the summer temperatures below. Mount Olympus is an ascent that must be earned as much as prepared for. The seemingly gentle scenery, the heavenly waterfalls, and enchanted meadows sometimes make us forget that we are climbing a mountain whose peaks tickle the stars. It's an almost hallucinatory crescendo-like climb where it's sometimes hard to get your bearings in the spatial scale of your surroundings. As soon as you cross a pass, a new view unfolds before you. There's an unreal graphic aspect to it, which the fine lines of the rocks cutting the horizon, transforming the landscape with every step you take towards the peaks. Immense, pointed, craggy, and half hidden in the mist, the ridges seem endless. Hidden in an eternal fog, the mountain peaks forbidden by mortals by Olympian legends seem never to have been so close, and yet so far away. From here, Mount Olympus revels its mystical dimension, and the excitement of discovering its secret summits is at its peak. Adding to the extraordinary character of the place, wild horses have taken over these sacred heights. It's not uncommon to come across a herd of them on the steep slopes of the peaks. Fans of mythology will inevitably think of Pegasus, one of the most famous fantasy creatures of Greek legend. This winged horse, son of Poseidon, was at Zeus's service, charged with bringing lightning and thunder to Olympus before transforming him into a constellation and placing him in the sky. When the cloud ceiling is pierced, a spectacle worthy of the greatest ancient plays is revealed. Over the centuries, brutal meteorological variations and the invisible power of snow have shaped impressive rocky peaks. These rocky peaks, named Mythikas, Scala, Scolio, and Stephanie, approach the 3,000-meter mark. Slightly lower down, we find smoother, more accessible peaks, like Agios Antonios to the north, Kalogeros to the south, and Tumpa in the center. These variations in relief create an extraordinary backdrop for our amazed eyes. It almost makes you wonder what the point of being a bird is when you can reach such heights. In the heart of these complex rocks, endemic flowers of the viola family have existed for millennia. It's almost an anomaly that these delicate plants with broad purple petals have been able to withstand the mountain's many ups and downs. We have to believe that the mysteries of Olympus belong to her alone, and that they will continue to amaze us for as long as we protect her. Up here, on top of the world, we have the feeling that the gods have finally accepted our arrival. As we gaze down into the ravines that slope down to the sea, the wonder of it all becomes exceptional. The rocks, whose shades alternate between blue-gray and crimson, rub against the powerful gusts of wind that ricochet and whistle against the mountain. We're at the heart of a sensory experience in which every detail contributes to the harmony of this timeless moment. To honor the invitation, we must now enjoy each moment, as nature reminds us that even at the summit of this eternal mountain, we are but its fleeting passengers. Historically, the country of Slovenia, a Central European country at the crossroads of civilization, was juggled between empires and kingdoms before becoming an independent sovereign state in 1991. Despite a complex history, often misunderstood, marked by successive annexations and dismemberments, the Republic of Slovenia is now a developed country that has a unique biodiversity in Europe. In this episode, we'll be taking you on a tour of a breathtaking part of the world. Although the country has a small coastline on the Adriatic Sea, it's not the sandy beaches that we'll be taking you on a tour of. but the many other unexpected attractions. Are your laces tied? Is your bottle full? Join us on an autumnal journey through valleys, lakes, and forests in the heart of the Julian Alps. Further west, between France and Italy, in the so-called Western Alps, Mont Blanc stands as the highest peak. However, the iconic mountain range extends eastward for more than 1,200 kilometers, passing through Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Austria, southern Germany, and Slovenia. Today, we'll be exploring the Slovenian side of the Alps, where more than 150 peaks exceeding 2,000 meters are recorded, along with the Triglav National Park, which features the highest point, Mount Triglav at 2,864 meters. Triglav is a must-see attraction for the people of Slovenia, who have even added the three-peaked ridge to their national flag. Located in the northeast of the country, this area offers a multitude of landscapes to travelers. The park comprises hills covered in woodland, steep-sided passes and peaks, magical valleys, timeless rivers, waterfalls and gorges, and immense, uniquely blue lakes. With its exceptional natural beauty, the Triglav National Park, like the river of the Julian Alps, became the first Slovenian biosphere to join the Man and the Biosphere program in 2003. This intergovernmental program, linked to UNESCO, aims to create a worldwide network of biosphere reserves. The Triglav National Park, home to a remarkable collection of endemic species, is part of a global ecological policy aimed at safeguarding natural and managed ecosystems. But where do we start? There are so many paths, trails, and routes to discover in the Triglav National Park, which covers more than 800 square kilometers. We suggest leaving from Savica and heading for the heights of the municipality of Boin, home to one of Slovenia's most beautiful jewels, the Seven Lakes Valley. Perched high in the mountains, these lakes and marshes are said to be the most worth visiting in the country. The waters of the highest lake flow towards the Socha Valley and the Adriatic Sea, while the other lakes, slightly lower down, are all connected as their streams flow towards the Savaboinka River and later on towards the Black Sea. Around the lakes, wooden constructions that seem straight out of a fairy tale have sprung up, like mushrooms after a good autumn rain. Actually, these rustic buildings are pasture huts where cheese is made. Here, dairy farming is based on the principle of using natural resources without exhausting them, exploiting them without abusing them to preserve and protect them. Dairy products made and sold on the mountain pastures are much more than food for visitors or a source of income for farmers. They are the result of a harmonious cohabitation between humans and nature. But let's get back to our alpine lakes. The glacial valley where they sit has been protected since 1924 within Triglav National Park. Formed by several natural depressions, the lakes are the result of melting glaciers that have created small basins through erosion. To see the 7 main lakes, it will take around 7 hours. In fact, there are more than 7 lakes, but the most common ones are Lake Planina, Double Lake, Lake Ledvica, and Green Lake. Green Lake is named after the abundance of algae that has grown on the bottom of the lake. Its shallow depth means that you can see the greenish color of the chlorophyll plants on its surface. As for the other lakes, while some color variations relating to their names can be seen depending on the seasons and weather conditions, the scientific explanations for their names are admittedly mysterious, much like the atmosphere of the Triglav National Park on this misty autumn day. Despite their different geological characteristics, the lakes have one thing in common. They are covered in ice for more than 6 months, sometimes until July, which creates some very unique natural habitats. In their cold, peaceful waters, different species of algae, microscopic shrimps, and insect larvae create a wonderfully well-organized ecosystem. Contrary to what you might think, for many years fish were strangers to these fragile and vulnerable environments, which are completely self-sufficient. However, a few decades ago, humans decided to introduce them in an attempt to control the spread of an excessively invasive algae. While they initially helped maintain the balance of the lakes by regulating the presence of invasive plants, they ultimately disrupted the lake's natural balance by promoting the appearance of new invasive plants that had transformed previously clear waters to a yellow-green color. Although it's strictly forbidden to swim in the alpine lakes that fall under the park's protection regime, some visitors break this rule. When we sweat, our bodies create nutrients such as phosphates, which are released into the water. These same nutrients lead to the excessive growth of aquatic plants, which are the main cause of deteriorating conditions in the alpine lakes. This excessive growth increases organic matter, whose decomposition is responsible for decreasing oxygen levels. Alpine lakes are highly sensitive and vulnerable to the slightest changes in their natural rhythm, and any change can cause major disruption. The mission in the Triglav National Park is to also raise visitors' awareness of these different issues to preserve the natural harmony of these areas. Apart from the lakes, other plant species have taken up residence in the Triglav Mountains. While the valley is mainly covered in lichen, many alpine flowers have also taken over the plateau. Marsh thistles generally grow in damp areas. Calamint nepeta, on the other hand, prefers dry, stony soil. Better known as lesser calamint, this perennial plant has a refreshing minty scent. Achillea millefolium, or yarrow, a member of the Asteraceae family, has been used in traditional medicine for thousands of years. It takes its name from Achilles, the Greek mythological hero who used it to treat his and his soldiers' wounds during the Trojan War. In the rocky slopes, you might catch a glimpse of the delicate bellflower, accustomed to shifting terrains and recognizable by its purple bell-shaped flowers, not to be confused with the bladder campion, a species commonly found along the edges of pathways. The Seven Lakes Valley is famous around the world. This area is one of the best known in the national park. The Triglav has many other facets for those who want to explore its trails. To discover more, we're taking you a little further east into the heart of Slovenia's forests. The forest itself is a landscape in the Triglav National Park. This gigantic forest covers almost 2/3 of the surface area and is just as visible in the valleys, on the steep slopes, and the high plateaus. This tree cover, where species evolve according to the soil and which dates back several thousands of years, has helped protect many species that have disappeared in less preserved regions, such as large mammals like bears, wolves, lynxes, or even deer, whose calls are sometimes heard but are difficult to track. To the east of the park, coniferous forests have developed in the acidic soils of the subalpine plateaus like Mezhlaka. Viewed from the sky, these pine trees form a sublime canopy that reaches an altitude of 1,000 meters. It's difficult to determine the age of this forest because the species that populate it didn't necessarily appear at the same time, but it's certain that it is multicentennial. Despite the seemingly calm atmosphere in these parts, spectacular wildlife has developed here. If you listen carefully, behind the creaking branches and whistling pine needles, you'll hear insects buzzing and birds singing. Nature is speaking, as if it were telling the passing human, tiny amidst the forest of giants, the Slovenian legends and the secrets of Triglav. Some geologists agree that forests are nature's zenith. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the first mosses developed on the bedrock thanks to rainfall. These mosses developed into plants, forming soil and then fertile ground, in which larger plants could take root. The shade provided by these new shrubs has facilitated the ongoing regeneration of the soil. This regeneration occurs as humus forms through the decomposition of plants by insects and the establishment of underground networks through the symbiotic relationship between fungi and plant roots. In this woodland landscape, when you break through the fog, delicately balancing on the tips of the peaks, it reveals a virtuous and extraordinary cycle for those who know how to contemplate it. Close your eyes for a moment, and you can sense the omnipresence of conifers through the smell of resin that wafts through the air. And when you open them, you have to look to the sky to see the tops of these majestic pines. The reason they stand upright in a pyramid shape towards the sky is to efficiently shed the layer of snow that would otherwise envelop them during the harsh and lengthy winters that are characteristic of Triglav's alpine climate. In these eastern plateaus, the forests are mainly composed of spruces and a few larch trees. Spruce is easily recognized by its straight trunk and its first branches with needles that are only visible halfway up. In its original habitat, for example in primary forests that have never been touched by humans, this tree can reach record heights of around 60 meters. Larch trees are no less impressive. The oldest in the Triglav forest is 1,050 years old, the age at which a forest can become primary again. The larch is the only European conifer that sheds its needles in autumn. As they fall to the ground, they contribute to the regeneration of humus and the forest's virtuous cycle. The needles that fall to the forest floor are a real godsend for wood ants, because while life tends to extend upwards, it also flourishes at ground level. After collecting them, worker ants assemble them to build an anthill at the foot of a larch tree, provided the branches let in a few rays of light. If the sun fails to shine, the workers will abandon their nest. Early in the morning, they open holes on the sunny side of the anthill to let heat in. When it's too hot, they close them and open them on the shady side to cool the anthill. This is how the ants maintain a temperature of between 22 and 30 degrees in their habitat, which they need to raise their brood. At the base of the trees, a whole undergrowth has formed, sheltering delicate flowers attracted to the shade. They cohabit with ancient mosses and tufted lichen, true indicators of fresh air. On the other side of the park, close to the border with Italy, the Socia flows through the heart of the Trenta Valley. The turbulent flow of the park's largest river keeps hikers company as they stroll along the stream. The Emerald River, with its characteristic blue-green color, is rightly considered one of the most beautiful in Europe. The river is dotted with rapids, narrow gorges carved out of the rock, and towering waterfalls. All along this gorge, the trees do not exceed an altitude of 1,600 meters. Only species that have managed to adapt to harsh weather conditions can survive in the Slovenian mountains. This is the case with beech trees, a prominent feature in the western part of the park. Its oval, serrated-edged leaves adorn the landscape with their bright green hue, which turns into a coppery shade of autumn. Extremely hardy, it is second only to the oak, the tree that best withstands the harsh winters of this alpine region. It is particularly fond of damp soils, hence its presence along rivers. Other tree species have adapted to the unique climate of the Triglav, such as willows and alder trees, which are typical of these habitats, as well as shrubs like hop hornbeam and dwarf ash, which thrive in the Massif's limestone soil. This vegetation, known as the riparian zone, for example, the vegetation found along rivers and streams, helps to ensure the long-term survival of their ecosystems. These trees act as biological reservoirs, providing hiding places, shelter, and food for neighboring fauna. Their roots hold the soil, ensure the proper maintenance of the banks, and prevent flooding. The foliage canopy creates shade over part of the watercourse, which helps it to maintain a temperature favorable to the species living there, such as the famous marble trout of the Socia River, an endemic species of the Triglav National Park that is naturally protected by impassable waterfalls. This freshwater fish is easily recognized by its relatively large head and characteristic marbled pattern of its gray-white skin. The trout follows a path to the Adriatic Sea, but every year it finds it harder and harder to complete its journey. Pollution, environmental changes in favor of water sports such as canoeing or rafting, and crossbreeding with other common trout species significantly harm its habitat. It is now one of the most endangered endemic species that the park is trying to protect. The national parks are trying to set an example in protecting these geographical areas and endemic species. Thanks to their preservation missions, entire ecosystems can flourish. With this detour along the Socia River, you'll understand that the Triglav National Park is just as famous for its enchanting forests as it is for its countless rivers. Gorges, waterfalls, lakes and peat bogs. Every year, the park welcomes travelers in search of turquoise waters and high-altitude lakes. It may be a cliché, but it's important to remember that it's only because of the water supply that this region can boast such an abundance of biodiversity. Although the Alps cover only 11% of Europe's surface area, they supply more than 90% of the water needs of the so-called lowlands. There are more than 250 springs in the Triglav Mountains, which provide an extraordinary natural reservoir of drinking water for the majority of Slovenia's inhabitants. The rushing alpine rivers flow from the mountains to the Adriatic, filtered over many years by multiple layers of rock and teeming with minerals and nutrients. If you don't want to dive in, you can fill your bottle at one of the many springs and enjoy the natural benefits. It should also be noted that in the Triglav, the limestone rocks that have been formed by water are said to be karstic. Karstic landscapes are found in regions with limestone formations, characterized by the development of unique terrain due to the erosion of rock by water over millennia. Karsts feature a primarily hydrographic network and a subterranean terrain punctuated by caves and sinkholes. In fact, the term karst originated from the eponymous karst region, a high limestone plateau located between Italy, Slovenia, and Croatia, as it was here that experts and speleologists first analyzed these phenomena. In addition to these hidden natural wonders, Triglav National Park has another special ecosystem on the surface that's just beneath our feet, where small cushions of soaked moss cover the ground. These are peat bogs. On the Pokljuka Plateau, areas of stagnant water are made up of peat, a fossilized organic matter formed from plant debris accumulated over centuries. Dense and dark, the strong smell of humus confirms the quality of this soil. The process of creating peat bogs dates back to after the last ice age, some 12,000 years ago, when retreating glaciers left behind small lakes. Over time, plants made from organic debris grew in these aquatic areas. Water turned acidic has encouraged the growth of plants, including peat mosses, which are now a prevalent species. Let's take a closer look. These beautiful mosses, which don't go unnoticed, have an almost magical power over the soil of Pokljuka Plateau, where the tallest coniferous forests have grown around them. They retain water like sponges and help to redistribute it. After melting snow or periods of rainfall, they absorb as much as they can by swelling to prevent the soil from flooding. They then release water during drier periods to keep the soil moist throughout the year. Delicate and threatened, some of these natural treasures have unfortunately been destroyed in lower-lying areas to make way for agriculture or firewood plantations. This unique ecosystem is extremely fragile and remains highly protected today. The park reserves access to these areas for scientists researching the Ice Age, among other things. Water may be hidden underground or trapped in peat bogs, but it can also be found on the surface of Slovenia's many lakes. Slovenia's largest permanent lake, Lake Boin, is located in the Triglav region. Located right in the center of the park, it stretches for more than 3 kilometers between the two largest valleys in Triglav. Its crystal clear water, which turns from turquoise to deep blue depending on the sky, reminds us that this is a glacial lake. As night falls, silver reflections glide across the water, giving the lake a mystical atmosphere. The ethereal ambience is almost surreal. Another Slovenian legend says that when God divided the earth among mankind, he forgot about one silent group who were waiting patiently for their turn. Moved by the humility of these men and women, he decided to offer them the greatest land there is, a place of divine beauty that he wanted to preserve as his resting place, the valley of Lake Boin. A few kilometers away is Lake Bled, which is less wild but just as impressive. Legend has it that the lake was created by the wrath of God to punish the shepherds who allowed their cattle to graze around the Church of the Assumption of Mary. He submerged the meadows underwater to seal off the place of worship. Bled Island is Slovenia's only natural island. If you get the chance to visit, ring the bell of the Baroque church to make your wishes come true. These two lakes play an essential role in a park where the water cycle is everywhere. They are supplied by glacial meltwater, the largest freshwater reserve on Earth. The water from the peaks is the third largest reservoir in the world after continental waters and the oceans. However, this is in danger of disappearing because by 2100, most glaciers will have disappeared due to global warming. Sadly, these marvels of nature are destined to become scree-like moraine fields, the only reminders of their glorious past. Now, we head northeast of the lake towards the Vintkar Gorge. This woodland valley, like many other Slovenian gorges, was shaped with karstic rock. The landscape has been shaped by an ancient glacial phase and the continuous presence of water from glacier melt and high levels of rainfall year-round, which have carved out unique passages in the rocks. Vintgar is like a secret artery, with some passages completely inaccessible and thus perfectly mysterious. In the more accessible places, there are small round pools, polished by years of water flow and sediment. Lichen and mosses, nature's trailblazing organisms, have coated every rock in the gorge. Other plants known as liverworts, which grow in the crevices or on the walls of the ravine, are also bioindicators of the proper functioning of this environment, which is both aquatic and terrestrial. At the heart of this gorge, which can be traversed thanks to an ingenious system of wooden walkways, the Shum waterfall is located towards the end of the ravine. Hidden within a basin shaped like a tall jug, its 13-meter drop makes it the longest river waterfall in Slovenia. However, due to advancing erosion in the Julian Alps, it has been receding more and more over the years. To observe other, more spectacular waterfalls, let's head further west, upstream of the Socha River. In the distance, you can see the breathtaking and majestic Boca waterfall. Fed by a karst spring located beneath a nearly vertical limestone wall, the spring has a relatively high flow rate due to its underground drainage. The resulting vigorous flow results in a spectacular two-level waterfall. The waterfall cascades down the mountainside for over 100 meters before crashing into a first rocky terrace and continuing its descent on a second tier of about 30 meters. In this tumultuous water, life is barely conceivable. Firstly, the temperature remains very low throughout the year due to its alpine location. And in this constantly turbulent water, only small mosses, young algae, and insect larvae can develop before being transported downstream to calmer environments where other organisms can flourish. Downstream from the waterfall, the Boca River flows through a steep valley with a stony bottom and joins the Socha River after less than a kilometer, making it paradoxically one of the shortest rivers in Slovenia. Let's keep enjoying the incredible energy of waterfalls by heading to the northern part of the park to discover one that some Slovenians consider one of the jewels of the region. Nestled among dense and wild vegetation is the Peričnik waterfall. To be more specific, this is actually a series of 2 waterfalls, although most visitors miss the one upstream, which is more difficult to reach. The lower waterfall has an impressive straight drop of 52 meters and a geological feature that sets it apart from the others. The rock has been eroded by glacial water, creating an opening in the cliff that literally allows you to enter inside the mountain and walk around the waterfall to admire it from all angles. Some winters, when it freezes over, seasoned climbers sometimes attempt to scale the imposing wall of ice over the waterfall. The ever-present gushing water makes the Triglav a lively and constantly changing landscape. During heavy rains, ephemeral waterfalls emerge where rocks allow rainwater to run off, giving the atmosphere of Triglav an even more magical character than usual. Let's set off in search of the peaks, where water is welcomed in all its forms, where clouds, ice, and snow transform the face of these ancient rocks that reveal themselves at the leisurely pace of altostratus clouds. In these high-altitude landscapes, the climate is extremely variable and unpredictable, in addition to being covered by a blanket of snow for more than half the year. Yet it is near these peaks that a concentration of flowers, suited to the altitude and even scree, has managed to find a place. Perched above the shimmering lakes and dense forests that populate the glacial valleys, the high-altitude meadows of Triglav are astonishingly rich. Close to 2,000 meters above sea level and with remnants from the Ice Age, they have managed to maintain soil rich enough to allow endemic species to survive. These high-altitude meadows are a biome in their own right. Invisible at this time of year, marmots hibernate between mid-October and spring. In summer, their presence is made known by a multitude of holes dug in the ground with their sharp front paws, allowing them to slip into underground hiding spots where they are safe from predators. In the absence of marmots, some sheep have taken up residence in the area. These are Bovet's sheep. The breed has a strong genetic code, proving that it's an ancient breed carefully selected by experienced shepherds generation after generation. Preserving these endemic species is important in more ways than one. From a landscape perspective, these breeds are adapted to their habitat and natural conditions, making them best suited to preserve the landscape. As far as genetics are concerned, they represent a reservoir of essential characteristics for breeding. And finally, on a cultural level, they are living proof of successful long-term breeding practices, making them valuable from an ethnological point of view. At the top of the park, the highest peaks rise to over 2,000 meters. These mountain peaks, difficult to access, are connected by a succession of steep cliffs and precipices. From a mountain refuge, let's pause for a moment to admire the dance of the mist and clouds over the Trenta Valley. In what looks like a game of hide and seek, the cotton-like shapes are trying to prevent the sun from making its mark on the mountain. But when the rays pierce through, they sweep each massif with their divine beams as if offering travelers the moving landscape of a living mountain. At the very west of the park, on the border with Italy, the Cannon summit rises to 2,587 meters. Identifiable phenomena are perfectly inscribed on its walls. Firstly, the layers of sedimentary rocks are evident. They are stacked on top of each other, offering a glimpse of the mountain's different elements. Its arid karst plateau is made up of many sinkholes and shafts, making the ascent particularly difficult in foggy conditions. Karst has also carved out lapias. These are like long parallel grooves in the rock, formed by the long-term runoff of water, which over time has dissolved the surface. In the foothills of these jagged peaks, immense moraines have covered the mountain slopes with scree. This collection of rock fragments is highly unstable. In a single day, hundreds of kilos and sometimes even tons of small stones can change position. Fortunately, on the path leading to the summit, you can find a must-see flower of the Alps, the Edelweiss. This flower, which belongs to the Asteraceae family, is instantly recognizable by its star shape. Its petals are covered in felt so that not a single drop of water is lost. This is one of the most famous mountain plants, partly because of its rarity. Its name comes from the German Edel, which means noble, and Weiss, which means white. More poetically, in the language of flowers, the Edelweiss symbolizes the noble memory of a past love. The final ascent is the Triglav, the eponymous peak of the park, which towers at 2,864 meters above sea level. Its ridge is difficult to climb and has a unique atmosphere. According to tradition, one is not truly Slovenian until they have climbed this giant that features on the national flag. In Slovenian, Triglav means the three heads and represents Svarog, the father of the gods in Slavic mythology, along with his two other facets, Veles and Perun. This triptych embodies the three forces that govern the universe: expansion, retention, and balance. The chamois is the quintessential emblem of Slovenia, which even attributes a legend to it, that of Zlatorog. This chamois with golden horns is said to have lived in harmony with humans in the paradise of Triglav until a hunter came to steal his treasure. In a never-ending hunt, Zlatorog was first wounded. His blood melted the snow, giving rise to magnificent red flowers. The chamois grazed one of them to regain his strength and fled. And since the hunter did not give up, Zlatorog managed to distract him by reflecting the sun with his golden horns. Blinded, the man fell into a ravine, and Zlatorog himself disappeared forever, taking with him the secret of his treasure. Remnants of the Ice Age, these mountains have stood the test of time, shaping their appearance and ecosystems. The Alps are relatively young, having begun to form only 100 million years ago, as a result of the convergence and collision of the African and European tectonic plates. And like all mountains, they continue to change over time. The majestic ridges may seem immovable, but they are but a brief chapter in geological time. While it's our duty to respect and preserve them, erosion will always prevail. The jagged and steep formations soften into gentle, rounded slopes, and the world's highest peaks will become modest hills while new mountain ranges emerge from the ground. Perhaps this is the secret treasure of Zlatorog. Our view of the mountains is only a snapshot. Nature is impossible to grasp. It follows its cycle of genesis and destruction, and this journey into the heart of Triglav is simply the sensitive testimony of a colossus in its twilight. The Mediterranean Alps began to form in the late Cretaceous period, around 145 million years ago. The meeting of the Arabian, African, and Eurasian tectonic plates led to the formation of the Dinaric Alps, which cover an area of 175,000 kilometers. Today, we're taking you to Croatia to discover one of the most beautiful natural parks in this alpine chain. Spanning the regions of Lika to the north and Zadar to the south, Paklenica National Park is a real natural gem. Thanks to its unique natural features, enchanting forests, and extraordinary geomorphological structures, Paklenica was declared a national park in 1949 to protect the best preserved forest reserve in Dalmatia. The name Paklenica is closely linked to the majestic black pine forests. The Croatians call the resin of this local tree paklina, which has medicinal properties and was also used to make protective wax to coat the fishing boats that sailed the Adriatic. Paklenica is famous for its deep gorges, from which you can admire magnificent canyons that irrigate the oldest forests in Europe, as well as its rocks, marvelously shaped into exceptional caves and walls, well known to climbers from all over the world who come to test themselves on its steep slopes. Underground, many caves have been carved out by time and the force of underground water. These underground formations are the result of the karstic phenomenon, where the dissolution of limestone by acidic water creates complex networks of caves and caverns. On its highest point, the park is home to one of the slopes of the Velebit mountain range, a famous coastal mountain chain that crosses most of the country and offers breathtaking views of the Adriatic from its highest plateaus. Today, the park is classified by UNESCO as a biosphere reserve. This is an international network of the planet's most important ecosystems, whose mission is to maintain a balance between protecting biological diversity and using it sustainably. Certain areas of Paklenica are protected by law in order to preserve their landscapes, species, and ecosystems. This unique status helps to raise awareness about environmental protection issues among the local population and tourists. With 150 kilometers of trails, hiking is the perfect way to explore this park. However, behind these breathtaking landscapes lies the growing threat of climate change. Now more than ever, climate change is threatening to upset this seemingly perfect balance. At the entrance, we are greeted by an impressive canyon that stretches 14 kilometers into the heart of the national park. This canyon is called Velika Paklenica. Like its younger neighbor, Mala Paklenica, it is a result of a gorge carved out by the force of water over centuries. To understand how they were formed, we need to go back to the last ice age. The highest peaks of Velebit were covered by glaciers at the time, but with no forest cover to limit their erosion, the rock faces gradually eroded away. A large amount of debris landed in the river, which was much more abundant at the time, increasing its flow. The force of the current, combined with the acidity of the water in the softer strata of the mountain, have created deep gorges that have reached all the way down into the park. The vertical cliffs of Velika Paklenica are breathtaking. In this immense canyon, it's hard not to feel tiny. The walls of rock stretch as far as the eye can see. These impressive natural walls rise up to 700 meters, while the depth of the gorge reaches 400 meters in places. At the start of the canyon, only 10 meters separate the two cliffs, rising to almost a kilometer at its widest point. There's nothing like standing in this narrow gap to feel the rock's organic nature, the reflections of the sun, and the scars of time on its eroded wall. Along this path, in the bed of the gorge, women used to return to their villages laden with supplies. They would walk for miles under the scorching sun, laden with sacks of salt and wheat from the coast or the fertile soils of the Lika region. Those who walk the canyon floor today are following in their footsteps. If you feel like you're being watched as you wander along, you may see a wild goat peering out from behind a thicket. The reality is that these are often domestic goats that have returned to a wild or semi-wild state through the phenomenon of marronage, which means that they have escaped from captivity to live far away from humans. The difference between them and other goats is not genetic, but purely ethological. It's simply their way of life that has changed. Like horses, which have been found marooned on all 5 continents, goats seem to adapt to life in the wild without delay. This goat, for example, seems happy with its new life in the canyon, and its missing horn in no way affects its agility when grazing on the higher foliage of shrubs. A little further on, the Velika River links the peaks to the mainland. It rises in the heights of Velebit and flows through the region as far as the coastline of Starograd, where it ends its course in the Adriatic Sea. Hundreds of years ago, the river flowed down the canyon at great speed, but the Palanica stream no longer flows through the valley as it once did. In summer, it's like a dry gorge, so the soil is dry and rocky. Over the years, the flow of the river has stabilized, but global warming has weakened this beautiful natural environment. The cause is directly linked to rising temperatures, which are preventing snow from accumulating as much as before in the park's higher regions and are gradually causing the meltwater in the national park to disappear. Nevertheless, the soil remains remarkably fertile. The precious water that trickled down from the summits enabled certain plants to survive the last ice age. This is the case for a large number of endemic species in the Campanula family, which have found their way into the cracks in the rock. In the shade of the large leaves of the fig trees that fill the valley with fruity, woody aromas, they display their delicate petals that open timidly in the shape of purplish stars. There are also a number of aromatic plants such as mountain savory and thyme. Here, a Morosphinx is quietly gathering nectar, an exceptional butterfly renowned for its ability to gather nectar while hovering. Imitating hummingbirds, it feasts on flower nectar that other insects can't reach thanks to its long, slender proboscis. Its flight is uncommonly fast and precise. These flowers attract pollinators and other insects that are the feast of choice for the almost 250 species of birds found in the park. Most of them are nesting birds, particularly attracted by the vertical stratifications of Paklanica, which provide ideal shelters for their survival. In Croatian, Velika means big, and Mala means small. Mala Paklanica, so named because it's slightly less imposing than its elder brother, is still impressive when it rises up in front of visitors. Surrounded by rock, a dense flora spreads out in this vegetal basin. These include the mullen-leaved Inula, a magnificent species with cottony leaves that is abundant on the Balkan Peninsula and thrives on the warm limestone rocks at mid-altitude. You will also come across some scrubland euphorbia. Its vigorous stems are upright with oblong leaves, and from March to June, large green-yellow fluorescent flowers bloom and color the canyon. Even more surprising was the fact that we came across some grapes. I guess even the vines like it here in the canyon. In these wild and sunny landscapes, we also discovered the mysterious terebinth. This shrub, which blends harmoniously into the scrubland, spreads its branches 3 to 5 meters high. Its deciduous leaves give off a powerful resinous scent, perfuming the warm air of the canyon. A true symbol of longevity, the terebinth tree can live for more than 100 years, bearing witness to the centuries of history it has contemplated from these ancestral lands. As for its fruit, at first small white peas, they evolve over the weeks and take on brilliant shades, changing from pink to red and finally ripening to a brownish hue. These characteristic bunches add a touch of color and vitality to a picture already so rich in diversity. Where Velika Paklenica can easily be explored on foot, Mala Paklenica requires a steeper, more alpine approach, demanding a certain amount of stamina and fitness. The trails wind through spectacular scenery. Every ascent is a confrontation with the majesty of nature, a challenge that is both physical and spiritual. But the efforts required to climb the steep slopes of Mala Paklenica are not in vain. They will even be rewarded with a breathtaking view of the Adriatic Sea from the heights of the canyon. It's a breathtaking sight, where the contrast between the ruggedness of the canyon and the richness of the watery backdrop creates a unique atmosphere. It's perhaps in this unlikely marriage of alpine brutalism and marine serenity that the beauty of Mala Paklenica lies. Each hike becomes a journey of self-discovery, an exploration of oneself, as much as of the surrounding landscape. It is this symbiosis between effort and reward, between challenge and contemplation, that makes Mala Paklenica an unforgettable destination for nature lovers and adventure enthusiasts. As we venture off the beaten track, east of the canyons to the remote reaches of Paklenica National Park, the landscape undergoes a striking transformation. Stone and vegetation intertwine to form a picture that is both unexpected and mysterious. Rocky features seem to have emerged from the ground like natural sculptures, creating a series of spurs and promontories that dot the landscape. At the heart of this wild and almost unreal environment, futuristic rocks stand like silent guardians of this timeless landscape. Their strange silhouettes and enigmatic allure add an element of fascination to this spectacular setting. And yet, despite the apparent desolation of these places, a few traces of human presence remain. Dirt tracks wind their way through this wild landscape, revealing that this inhospitable land is not completely untouched by man. Thanks to the rivers that have long flowed down the gorge, magnificent forests have developed over the centuries. Here we find the famous black pine, the park's emblem, which even gave it the name of its sap, paklina, renowned for its medicinal properties. Its broad, dense branches spread masterfully across the canopy, aided by deep green needles that are as robust as they are elegant. The sinuous patterns formed by the bark on its trunk are reminiscent of the cracks in the rocks that surround this immense forest, while the sap that flows from the heart of the wood perfumes the surrounding area. Black pine is widespread in the Balkans and the Mediterranean and was used in major reforestation programs in the 19th and 20th centuries to control erosion and restore threatened mountain areas. Acclimatized to limestone soils, black pine is resistant to disease, extreme heat, and long periods of frost. This resilience makes it an indispensable ally in soil composition. While these pine forests are deserving of their reputation, another species is also making its presence felt in this region of Croatia. A very old beech forest stretches out on either side of Velika Paklenica. To the west, the Brezomen Jaka stream forms the valley of the same name. And behind this fork, beeches and purple lamures share this planet kingdom. Under our feet, nettles give off a delicate peppery scent, while above our heads, the smooth gray trunks of beech trees rise into the sky. The atmosphere in this beautiful natural habitat is peaceful. Some of the rocks look as if they have grown in the forest, as they mimic the elongated shapes of the beech trees. The sound of the wind gently swaying the branches accompanies the bird song that echoes from tree to tree. Here, a green Balkan lizard stands motionless, almost invisible as the color of its scales blends with its surroundings. In this riverbed, at an altitude of 500 meters, the beech, like the black pine, stands out for its ability to withstand the harshest of winters. This hardy species has taken its time to develop in the landscape. Snow sometimes settles here for more than 6 months, and these so-called slow-growth forests are among the oldest in Europe. However, according to meteorological models, climate change could jeopardize a large part of the current beech population, which could become extinct in certain regions of Europe by the year 2100. Threatened by habitat fragmentation and deforestation, these ecosystems have since been placed under protection, and no trees are allowed to be felled. Since 2017, these forests, considered to be primary, have been included on UNESCO's World Heritage List. They represent ecosystems that have been very well preserved for many years and are a precious and important landmark for many species such as lynx and deer. Beech is one of the most important species in the deciduous forests of temperate regions because it's an exceptional example of the territorial conquest that has taken place since the last ice age, more than 11,000 years ago. With the expansion of forest cultivation, large areas of woodland and in particular beech forests have disappeared across Europe. It is estimated that primary beech forests extended over 90 million hectares before human intervention in Europe. Today, primary beech forests cover only 90,000 hectares. The Paklenica landscape contains many other treasures. At first glance, the gorges might appear to be the most impressive features of the national park, but there are many hidden layers beneath the surface. The geological phenomena formed by karst can be seen at every level. Caves, pits, and underground rivers harbor very specific ways of life. As a reminder, karstic phenomena are used to describe the original relief of the landscape caused by the corrosion of rock by water over thousands of years. The subsoils of Paklenica are veritable labyrinths, with rocks shaped largely by erosion. But how were these cavities formed? Limestone spread over large area cracks over time and gradually becomes permeable. This is how seepage water, loaded with carbon dioxide and therefore sufficiently acidic, can dissolve the rock, infiltrate it, and form underground rivers. When water penetrates to the next level down, it hollows out the cavities that form the caves we are exploring today. To date, 115 pits and caves have been discovered by speleologists in Paklenica. The most well-known of these, Manita Pek, is located in the lower part of Velika Paklenica. In these karstic subterranean caves, it's colder than outside. The air is damp, and a dull echo resonates against the stone walls all the way to the bottom. The size of the underground chambers at Manita Pek is astonishing. The largest is 65 meters long, 45 meters wide, and 32 meters high. The impressive and enigmatic geological formations we see in the caves are a result of sediment deposits called speleothems. These phenomena are created by rainwater, filtered by surface vegetation and loaded with carbon dioxide. When this acidic water seeps into the ground, it dissolves the calcium carbonate present in the limestone, transporting the rock particles to the ceiling of the cave. There, upon contact with oxygen, carbon dioxide escapes. Deprived of this gas, the water is no longer acidic, allowing the calcium carbonate to resolidify and settle on the walls of the cave ceiling. The silence of this subterranean lair is broken by a steady, wet trickling sound. As water drips from the ceiling, the calcite crystals create stalactites, stalagmites, columns, and many other marvels slowly formed over thousands of years. Some of these geological formations can take on very curious shapes, earning them a reputation for resembling everyday objects or myths. And so we find a witch. An organ. Or a helmet among the breathtaking rock formations that resemble abstract or figurative sculptures that sit proudly out of the daylight. If it were just a few degrees warmer, we'd be tempted to spend hours observing these hypnotic rock formations, which, with a little imagination, transform the cave into a majestic underground Gothic cathedral. To the west of the park, one rocky spur stands out from the rest of the landscape. This is Božinac, one of Croatia's most impressive rocky landscapes. Here, the layers of white stone have been brushed by centuries of weathering, and at the top of this stone edifice stands Božin Kuk, reaching a height of 1,100 meters. To reach this spectacular viewpoint, you have to wind your way through the many karstic reliefs and formations typical of the area. Crevices, rocky areas, pits, and faults where dense shrubs have developed. All these remains are important reminders of glaciation, a geological period when many of the Earth's continents were glaciated. The moraine debris we encounter along the way is evidence of these times. A moraine is a mass of rocky debris, eroded and deposited by glaciers as they melt from a certain altitude. They can be recognized by patches of gravel spread out over a generally sloping area and by piles of rock. Among the many curves that make up this landscape designed by nature, natural water slides run down the slopes of Božinac. These long grooves that shape the mountains seem to have been cut out of paper, the rock so immaculate and the cuts so perfectly polished by time. As you walk up these rocky crevices, you come across a few shrubs that use the cracks to cling to the rock by some miracle. At the top of this film set, two craters carve out the summit of the mountain. You might think that they're the remains of a volcano or the footprint of a meteorite. Obviously, this is not the case. These geological curiosities have a scientific explanation that goes by the name of cryoclasia. From the ancient Greek kruos, cold, and klasis, to break or shatter, this process is a phenomenon specific to limestone rocks that have gone through glacial periods. With successive periods of freezing and thawing, the water absorbed by the rock over the centuries has successively changed from a liquid to a solid state. You might think that the rock would be unaffected by this, but the fact is that when it changes to a solid state, the volume as water molecules increases significantly. If you've ever forgotten a bottle of water in the freezer, you're sure to have noticed. As a result, the rock couldn't withstand the impact and became fragmented. The resulting debris, known as chips in the case of limestone, left an ideal path for runoff. Depending on the rock, the cracks form more or less sharp edges, and acid water runoff continues to carve out these cracks, widening parallels in the rock. They form two types of furrows, straight or winding gullies, and crevices, which literally cut through the rock. Some of the park's typical fruit trees have taken up residence here, piercing the rock to stand proudly in this magical setting, such as dogwood, whitebeam, and wild rose. Each of these trees produces small red berries in autumn. These pigmented spots at the end of their frail branches look like natural jewels, precious and seductive, which birds love. Once you've reached the summit of Bojan Kuk, you can take a deep breath of air on the summit plateau, which is smaller than a football pitch. Facing the Adriatic, the panoramic view is breathtaking, a testament to the immensity of our planet. In the distance, the sea sparkles in the sunlight. The shimmering horizon accompanies this breathtaking moment. From Bojanak, the whole of Croatia stretches out as far as the eye can see, creating the most beautiful of postcards. But Paklenica is full of other peaks, promising even more breathtaking discoveries than Bojan Kuk. Paklenika's history is inextricably linked with mountaineering and climbing. A favorite spot for climbers from all over the world, the park, with its complex, steep terrain and breathtaking views over the Adriatic, is an ideal playground for thrill seekers. Along the gorges, the park boasts almost 600 fully signposted cliffside routes. Some of these routes have karstic features that require a high level of technique to overcome. Straight, vertical, and immense. From below and above, Anika Kuk, Croatia's most famous rock, gives you vertigo. The routes start from the narrowest part of the Velika Paklenica Gorge, not far from the entrance to the park. It is one of the first karstic rocks in the large area separating the Velika and the Mala gorges, where most of the plateau and cliffs remain inaccessible. Lurking in the shadows, it seems to be asleep in the morning, but the low-angled afternoon sun awakens the giant and enhances its contours and ruggedness. Anika Kuk peaks at 700 meters, and its ascent is as impressive as it is perilous, as evidenced by the many collapsed boulders at its feet. The beginnings of climbing in Paklenica date back to 1938, when a young Croatian, Dragutin Bram, nicknamed Raka, attempted the first ascent of Anika Kuk. Unfortunately, the young climber fell to his death during this solo ascent. 2 years later, 2 climbers succeeded in ascending Anika and named their route Bram's Way to honor his memory. Since then, other routes have been mapped out and have become legendary. Brid Klina, on another slope, is much more difficult. Composed mainly of cracks and vertical holds, it is particularly demanding and dangerous. To be at one with the rock, with your body nestling against its mineral wall, is a unique sensation that climbers from all over the world come to Paklenica in search of. At its peak, Anika Kuk offers those who have climbed its slopes a breathtaking view. The sheer altitude brings with it a sense of wonder at the beauty of the landscape. At this altitude, you are alongside the birds of prey of the gorge, who have also come to gain height. From their sky, their sharp vision enables them to hunt prey. Here, a hovering bird is probably scouting out a target on the ground. In aerodynamic terms, this technique is unique. The bird cannot take advantage of the wind's force and must generate all the necessary thrust solely through the power of its wings to achieve this. The high-altitude rocks of Paklenica, where it's easy to find small shaded crevices as well as flatter surfaces in full sunlight, are favorable environments for reptiles. These reptiles are, in turn, the favorable meals of airborne predators when they are not feeding on rodents found below. To the east, an almost inaccessible and wild area is home to clearings of black pine trees. This is Velika Mochila, one of the park's protected forest areas. Above it is a much denser and more majestic mountain. The reward for this tough climb is the Vagansky Peak. To the north of the park, the Velebit Massif watches over the surrounding landscape. The ridgeline of its peak cuts through the horizon. The Velebit mountain range stretches over 145 kilometers and is part of the Dinaric Alps, a mountain chain linking Croatia to Albania, passing through Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro. Its proximity to the coast, its thousand-year-old forests, and its complex sedimentary rock make it a unique biosphere reserve, home to precious ecosystems. Vagansky is the highest point at 1,757 meters. This herbaceous mass, which can be seen in the distance, is the giant of the Massif, dominating the entire territory. On this peak and its neighbors, mountain pines and honeysuckle cover the landscape. This is the most compact forest in the park, beginning where the beech forest ends, just a little further down. In these dry and hostile mountains, above an altitude of 1,450 meters, most plant species find it difficult to survive. Few species can survive in these karstic habitats due to their shifting surfaces. However, the deterioration and erosion of the rocks caused by sun, ice, rainwater, and low temperatures has increased the moisture content of the soil. The moisture that seeps from the rock has made it possible for a very specific type of vegetation to grow peacefully. Degenia velebit, one of the most well-known endemic species of the Massif, grows in the cracks of this magnificent mountain. Some limestone cavities in the karst can reach several meters in diameter and represent a prime habitat for this mountain savory, which likely originated from the remnants of snow. The melting snow has long lingered in these hollows, allowing the growth of this aromatic and medicinal plant. Invisible behind these karstic reliefs, a wild presence roams these vast territories. The Vagansky forests are home to brown bears, wolves, and lynx. Although it's rare to come across these three great carnivores, the Paklenica National Park and the Velebit are now protected areas where hunting is strictly prohibited, unlike in the last century. These mammals, as rare as they are fascinating, are gradually finding a hospitable natural habitat that favors their reproduction in the wildest corners of the Dinaric Alps. For nature lovers and researchers alike, the Croatian mountains and their karstic landscapes are a priceless geological treasure, unique in the world. Their complexity and fragility make them sanctuaries where exceptionally rare flora and fauna can thrive, with some endemic species finding refuge only in Paklenica. Over the ice ages, these rocks have preserved the scars of time, bearing witness to their turbulent history. But today, the park faces a new challenge, one that is more pressing than ever. Recurring droughts threaten to unbalance the fragile ecosystems that thrive there. In a world in climate crisis, the Paklenica giant, undisturbed for millennia, now finds itself on the front line of these changes. The continent of Europe covers an area of over 10 million square kilometers, encircled by oceans, seas, and mountain ranges. Its vast size offers a geography of immeasurable richness, and its varied climates have shaped landscapes with a wealth of biodiversity. In the center of France, a mountain range known as the Massif Central, born from the rising of crystalline bedrock 500 million years ago, is home to a chain of dormant volcanoes. Their gentle, majestic curves offer the peaceful appearance of a slumbering being. Yet these volcanoes, with their calm and rounded silhouettes, could awaken at any moment and make the depths of the earth roar. In the heart of the Massif Central, the region of Auvergne owes its name to the prestigious Celtic people, the Auvergne, who inhabited this territory from the 7th century BCE until the Roman conquest. Due to their resources in gold, silver, bronze, and their mastery of metallurgy, the Auvergne were among the wealthiest and most powerful of the Gauls. Around the year 82 BCE, Vercingetorix, son of Celtulus, was born in this timeless landscape. This Auvergne leader, whose name meant Supreme King of Warriors, was one of the most powerful adversaries of Caesar during the historic Gallic War. This war pitted Caesar and his troops against certain Gallic people who had joined forces to win their independence from the Roman Empire. Although Caesar's troops crushed the revolt, Vercingetorix remains one of the greatest heroes of French history, celebrated by the nation for his bravery and quest for independence. The prestigious Auvergne people have left their mark on these Auvergne plateaux, silent witnesses to the great Celtic era. Every stream and every valley carries the echoes of a glorious past, making Auvergne a land where history eternally dances with the present. As we discover Auvergne, we're going to delve into a long history that takes us back to the dawn of time. The oldest volcanoes in Auvergne were formed over 65 million years ago. They are the result of tectonic phenomena and superimposed geological strata that triggered eruptions. And even though these volcanoes are extinct or dormant, their fascinating ecosystems have continued to evolve, offering us untold riches. Domes, cones, and craters each have their own specific rocks formed from cooled lava. The mineral composition of the soils has shaped the landscape with meadows and magnificent expanses of flowers that in some places have been transformed into ancestral forests. Lakes, Rivers, waterfalls, and peat bogs provide constant irrigation, helping the region to maintain a real balance. A site of remarkable volcanic activity, the Auvergne Volcanoes Regional Nature Park offers exceptional geological panoramas. Welcome to Europe's largest natural park. A mammoth entity spanning 5 natural regions, the Ardennes, the Mounts of Cantal, the Cézallier, the Monts d'Or, and the Monts d'Aume. We begin our journey in the Monts d'Aume region in the north of the park, which protects a breathtaking chain of volcanoes. The emblematic Chaîne des Puys. From above, these domes cover the Earth's surface with gentle and charming contours. Here, the vast forests have followed the curve of the domes. A puy is an ancient volcanic mountain. The word is derived from the Latin podium, meaning a small elevation of land. Puy then became the old French word for hill, peak, or mountain. Over the centuries, the word aged and has only survived in geographical names, mainly in Auvergne. The Chaîne des Puys, with its 80 volcanoes, is the youngest volcanic area in mainland France. The formation of this chain is the result of a geological phenomenon known as rift, which allows magma to rise to the surface. If the mountain range appears perfectly aligned, it is because it was created along a fissure parallel to the Limagne Fault, which fractured the ancient continental ground around 35 million years ago over a distance of around 30 kilometers. Following the formation of the Alps further east, the Earth's crust thinned and gave rise to a vast series of fissures and collapses, of which the fault is one. A trench nearly 3 kilometers deep formed at the location of the fault. But if you don't see it, it's because over the years, sediments have filled this trench, reaching the level of the Dome Plateau before rising to create this unique range. The Chaîne des Puys is 32 kilometers long and 4 kilometers wide, and is a collection of volcanoes with pure forms and very little erosion. Far from human habitation, alone in the world, those who discover these volcanoes cannot help but be overwhelmed by the sense of calm they exude. Their blanket of greenery almost makes you want to race down these soft, open-air slopes. The uniqueness of the Chaîne des Puys also lies in the different shapes of the puys. This topological difference is due to the process by which they were created. The lava that formed them came from different depths, so it did not impact the surface in the same way. There are 3 types of puys: cones, craters, and domes, such as the aptly named Puy de Dôme. There's something magical about discovering the Puy de Dôme. As it reaches 1,465 meters in altitude, it seems to peacefully watch over the other volcanoes in the chain, where it is definitively the emblem, the prime panoramic spot to discover the rest of the Auvergne landscape. Like all the volcanoes in the range, the Puy de Dôme is the result of a single eruption. This took place 11,000 years ago. It is an explosive or gray volcano. The magma from explosive volcanoes, which is acidic and viscous, accumulates under a layer of dried lava that eventually blocks the vent. The only way for the gases to escape is in terrible explosions and fiery clouds. There are 7 of these volcanoes in the park, easily recognizable by their polished domes, and they are concentrated in the central part of the range. They appeared between 15,000 and 9,200 years ago during the last phase of volcanic activity, and because of their young age are considered dormant rather than extinct. A new volcanic eruption could be just around the corner, in 3 months' time or 5,000 years' time. It's anyone's guess. Yet, to see them so calm, it's difficult to imagine what could disrupt the peaceful atmosphere that reigns over this gentle and silky landscape. In the world of flowers, each species reveals its own story, offering unique perspectives on the interaction between nature and humankind. Introducing the narrow-leaved fireweed and its delicately sculpted purple petals. This seemingly humble flower, however, revolutionized our understanding of pollination, since it was while studying it that a German botanist first devised the theory of insect pollination. Then, like a gentle whisper in the spring breeze, the sweet pea appears, a discreet plant that grows naturally in Europe, unassumingly and without any special acclaim. More impetuous, the purple notes of the Fuchs orchid distinguish it from its immaculate neighbors. This wild carnation with fringed petals is a subspecies unique to the Massif Central and is generally found above an altitude of 700 meters. Last but not least, Arnica, nicknamed Gold of the Mountains, shines among the alpine meadows. This precious flower is now protected because its populations have been heavily impacted by intensive farming, meaning its flowers are increasingly rare to find in their natural habitat. Large forests cover 35% of the Auvergne volcano's park. The majority of these are located in the voluptuous plateaus of the Chaîne des Puys. In these rows of trees stretching towards the sky, scents of pine sap and damp earth mingle with hints of mushroom. From an altitude of 800 meters and up to 1,400 meters, a small bird of prey comes to take advantage of these mature forests to breed and break the silence of the old sleeping trees. These wooded areas, which blend harmoniously with the endless curves of the Chaîne des Puys, provide essential ecological features for the surrounding ecosystems. This is thanks in particular to their mature population, rich in old trees and dead wood, which are real reservoirs of biodiversity and ecological habitats that are essential for many forest species. A bit further north, another Puy stands out, primarily for its color. This is the Puy de la Vache. It's one of the youngest volcanoes in the park. On this side of the range, the setting is more arid, almost desert-like. These are known as red volcanoes. The cone-shaped summit of Puy de la Vache was created by rising magma, which, upon contact with the air, produced projections. The irregular, vesicular, and fragmented rocks that cover part of the Puy de la Vache are cooled lava, known as scoria. scattered and dark, these natural sculptures give the landscape a lunar appearance. This cone has a special feature. Part of it was swept away by the lava flow, opening it up in the shape of a horseshoe. This crater is known as breached. The Pui's main lava flow joined in its neighbors to form a single flow of scoria and pozzolan. This small, light pink gravel, almost as if it were blown here by the wind, looks like it had been sprinkled on the surface of the Pui. With every step of this unstable ground, the rock crunches and cracks, awakening the silence of the volcanoes. Pozzolan is a volcanic rock with unique mechanical and chemical qualities. Neutral pH, high absorption capacity, very high resistance to heat, great filtration capacity. It is very useful for many activities, such as horticulture or water treatment. Not to be left out, the Nugel volcano is also home to a rock with unique characteristics. Known as volvic rock due to the famous natural spring from which it originated, this cooled lava is exceptionally solid. Significantly denser than pozzolan, its elegant pale gray color and clear fragmentation give it a more angular appearance. Surprisingly, under the fingertips, this practically indestructible stone feels almost cottony, so soft and pleasant to the touch. Resistant to water, frost, fire, pressure, and acids, it is essential for the construction of quality buildings. To the south of Mont Dôme lies another massif, the Mont d'Or. Formed 3 million years ago, this sublime group of alpine-like mountains is a stratovolcano that has erupted in different phases. These different geological events have created a wide variety of landscapes. Round summits, sharp peaks, jagged ridges, steep slopes, and vast, deep plains. Puy de Sancy, the highest peak in the Auvergne Volcanoes Regional Nature Park, rises to 1,886 meters. It separates the two sides of the massif, and the only way to link one side to the other is via the dizzying, narrow ridgeline. From all the way up here, breathtaking panoramic views reveal ancient glacial valleys on either side, created by the collision of water and fire. To reward walkers for the steep ascent of Puy de Sancy, a beautiful, colorful flower bed is on display in the valley. In this unique ecosystem, some exceptional flora emerges in spring. Some are endemic to the region, such as the Auvergne nautia, which is found above 500 meters altitude. Discovering these delicate, complex flowers is a pleasure for the senses. Each one has its own subtleties, scents, pigments, and character, just like so many other treasures that are protected by nature. Protecting them and studying them helps us to monitor the impact of global warming on specific areas, such as the Auvergne Volcanoes Park. The Chaude-Four Valley, perched on the southern slopes of Puy-de-Sancy, reveals a U-shaped outline when viewed from downstream, as it cuts across the area from ridge to ridge. In this indentation, vast meadows stretch as far as the eye can see, caressed by the cool mountain breeze. The origin of the name Chaude-Four goes back to the hot springs that were once found in the valley. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the discovery of these gaseous and iron-rich springs attracted developers who planned to create a spa in this exceptional location. However, the turmoil of the First World War put an end to the project, leaving the mountain in a wild state. Given the magnificence of the landscape and the environmental wealth of the site, the valley was declared a National Nature Reserve in 1991. Now preserved, it is home to a thriving biodiversity where the whispering of the wind seems to carry the echoes of glorious Celtic ancestors, silent witnesses to the eternity of nature. Carved into the flank of the valley, astonishing rocks emerge from the ground. These are dikes, fascinating geological phenomena. After a fissure, streams of magma rise to the surface before cooling. Glacial erosion later removes the softer rocks, leaving behind only the more resistant lava columns. Firmly clinging to the sides of this natural theater, the Dent de la Racune and the Crête de Coq are evidence of these volcanic activities from another era. A few kilometers south of the reserve, a very special and rather unusual type of volcano dominates the landscape. An immense blue eye has formed on a summit. This is Lake Pavin, which has settled in the 100-meter-deep heart of a volcano crater. Here, everything is about meditation. The breeze brushes the surface of the water. The branches of trees encircle this tranquil forest and sway in the alpine winds. The vastness of the sky is reflected in the mirror-like lake. Situated at an altitude of almost 1,200 meters, this phreatomagmatic volcano is the result of magma and water meeting 6,900 years ago. The sudden vaporization of water upon contact with the lava led to a violent reaction. A strong explosion which left a crater. Over time, this new hole at the top of the volcano filled with water and sediment. It is thanks to this sediment that it has been possible to assess the age of the volcano. One of the edges of the lake is quite spectacular. Lava flows have formed a splendid basaltic cliff as they cooled. These clear and regular columns are reflected on the serene surface of the lake. Standing vertically and carved like geometric figures, they are a paradise for climbers. In this pure, well-oxygenated water, many freshwater fish find an ideal living environment. This is the case for the Arctic char, a rare, fragile, and now protected species. Legends confirm the ancient fascination of this lake. which has fed the imaginations of local villagers since the Middle Ages. It is still associated with unsettling stories. This is where demons come to bathe in escapade through the chimney of hell. Their black souls trouble its waves. This is how the author Émile Roux-Barassac described Lake Pavin at the beginning of the 20th century. His disturbing writings helped to build myths and fantasies that are still passed down through generations. At the very heart of the park, a completely different setting unfolds. The Cézallier Massif, a central volcanic plateau in the Auvergne Mountains, offers us a new type of landscape. The word Cézallier may come from the Auvergne dialect Céjavé, meaning rye land. Unlike the mounts of Cantal and the Mont d'Or, its neighbors sculpted by glacial erosion into sharp ridges and steep cirques, the Upper Cézallier, although once covered in ice, maintains a peaceful and harmonious appearance where gentle, rounded reliefs blend into a delicate dance with the passing of time. As far as the eye can see, vast expanses of vibrant green undulate gently in the wind, like an ocean of grass caressing the slopes of the plateau, occasionally interspersed with a small road winding between the valleys. It's a landscape of infinite tranquility, where every hillock seems to have been carefully designed by nature's hand. The graceful shapes of the Cézallier provide the perfect canvas for contemplation and meditation, inviting visitors to escape into this endless expanse of greenery. The southern slope benefits from warm air updrafts from the valley. It is a very favorable habitat for wildflowers. St. John's wort, yarrow, ox-eye daisy, hollyhock mauve, mountain sheepspite, marsh cinquefolle, white hellebore, wood betony, purple foxglove. These thousands of colorful flowers attract many insects. Among the guests of the undergrowth, we find grasshoppers, and of course, pollinators such as butterflies, of which there are about 100 species. On the plateau, there's another particularly eye-catching flower that has a lofty appearance: yellow gentian. Like a ray of bright sunshine in the valley, this tall, hardy perennial plant can live up to 50 years, but only flowers after 10. Here, it unveils its bright yellow petals, a dazzling symbol of botanical richness. This is one of the top 3 medicinal and aromatic plants in France. It is the embodiment of versatility, finding its way not only into our pharmacies, but also into our drinks and spirits, adding a distinctive touch of bitterness to concoctions such as suze. Here, water is particularly abundant thanks to the numerous basins carved out by the glaciers that retreated 12,000 years ago. It is precisely in these basins that peat bogs have formed. The low temperatures and lack of oxygen in the water prevented the aquatic plants around the lake from decomposing completely. Over the centuries, delicate mosses called sphagnum mosses have grown. In the space of a few thousand years, they have accumulated and filled in all of the hollows, forming the fossilized organic material known as peat. By retaining water like sponges, peat bogs limit the extent of flooding and keep water flowing at a minimum in summer, helping to combat droughts. Just 1 kilo of this small moss is capable of holding 70 liters of water. What's more, these stagnant pools are an ideal habitat for a large number of insects. Attracted by these wetlands, many dragonflies and other damselflies have chosen peat bogs as their habitat. A 4-spotted dragonfly on a stem sways in the wind, seemingly defying gravity with grace and ease. And over there, a pair of azure damselflies, an extremely rare species. It is only found in France in the Massif Central and specifically to the Volcano Park area, as it seems to love the peat bogs in the middle mountains. The Cézallier is home to almost 80 species of birds. Some spend short periods of time here, while others have chosen the valley's nooks and crannies to nest for the duration of a breeding cycle. This one is on the prowl around dragonflies, which are the food of choice. Peat bogs represent extraordinary archives. Preserved for thousands of years on this plant vault, plant pollens and layers of volcanic ash constitute an invaluable memory for better understanding the history of these volcanoes. Now we leave these vast plateaus to head towards the south of the park. For early risers, the sunrise is a sight not to be missed. When the nights are cool, the vapor in the air forms small droplets that are so light they float above the grass. A wave of mist spreads low over the ground, giving the Auvergne landscape a mystical, almost surreal atmosphere. The very name Auvergne sounds like a distant echo of ancient times. Derived from the Latin Auvergne, the etymology of this region evokes ancient times when the Auvergne, a fearless Celtic people, ruled this land. In the mist, you can feel the weight of legends, battles, and centuries that have shaped these lands. Bit by bit, the landscapes of the Mounts of Cantal come into view. The peaks, ridges, and plateaus of the Mounts of Cantal form a single volcanic edifice 80 kilometers in diameter, covering an area of 2,000 square kilometers. This Cantal giant has a rich geological history and offers a magnificent panoramic view, especially from Puy-Marie. This stratovolcano is the result of multiple eruptions. As its name suggests, it is made up of strata, which are accumulations of layers of lava, ash, or boulders. Over 10 million years, the nature of the eruptions frequently changed, alternating between explosive phases and more effusive phases, each responsible for very contrasting reliefs. Some lava flows formed vast fertile plateaus with a basaltic subsoil. These green reliefs are now preserved thanks to the conscientious pastoral work carried out by Auvergne's farmers. The tinkling of bells resounds across the Cantal plateaus, the bells of Salers cattle. These cows are the symbol of extensive farming in Auvergne. Unlike other mountain ranges in France, here it's the hand of man that has shaped the landscape. As early as the end of antiquity, there was a need to free up land around low-altitude farms to grow crops to feed livestock in winter. Fodder. Plots of land above 900 meters have been cleared to accommodate livestock from mid-May to early November. During transhumance, also known as summer grazing, shepherds move the animals from the valleys to these high-altitude plateaus so that the animals can fatten up and reproduce. These high-altitude pastures are called alpage in the Alps, estive in the Pyrenees, and simply montagne in the Massif Central. At these higher altitudes, which are less affected by drought than in the valleys, the cows can graze as they please on carpets of tender grasses and wildflowers. Since cattle are large herbivores, cow manure adds a lot of humus to the soil, organic matter that is essential for good plant growth. In return, the diversity of flora that grows on this land gives the traditional cheeses produced in the area their very special qualities and flavors. For example, Gallium molugo, or bedstraw, gives a honey-like flavor to cheese, while alpine fennel gives cow's milk its characteristic aniseed scent. Sailors' cows, recognizable by their mahogany coat and their pretty lyre-shaped horns, feed on these tall herbs to produce a unique milk, the origin of 5 local protected designation of origin AOP cheeses: Sailors, Cantal, Saint-Nectaire, Bleu d'Auvergne, and Fourme d'Ambert. However, it's important to remember that these cows are on their own territory. With just a glance, they'll let you know if you're getting too close. So if you encounter them on your path, be sure to navigate around them with caution. Summer grazing is not just for cows. Although less common than cattle farming in Auvergne, sheep farming is also well established and even includes some remarkable sheep cheese producers. As well as delighting our taste buds, mountain cows and sheep shape the landscape. They contribute to preserving low, dense vegetation on these high-altitude plains, which would otherwise thrive into forests if left in the wild. Water flows from the heights down the mountain slopes, and when several streams from the summits meet in the valleys below, they form what is known as a couze, a typical Auvergne river. Its regular splashing soothes the entire valley and meanders along the mountainsides. Following their course, these lively waters lead us towards the Marilou forest. An island of woodland in the heart of lush summer pastures on the plateaus, the Marilou forest is steeped in history. According to legend, fairies are said to have hidden a treasure in this incredible environment. If you listen closely, you'll hear the sound of water singing. Follow this gentle music and you'll discover a small waterfall whose vigorous flow breaks the magical serenity of the surroundings. This water has cascaded down the slopes of Puy-Marie and crossed the neighboring valleys before coursing through the Marilou forest. The journey of this water from the peaks will continue downstream and eventually join the Dordogne. This precious and self-sustaining water cycle nourishes forests, pastures, and valleys. Feel free to enjoy the unique taste of this mineral-rich water thanks to the volcanic rocks. The Auvergne Volcanoes Regional Nature Park is known for its underground and mineral waters. But the surface landscapes are also shaped by water. A few kilometers east of the Mont d'Or, in the heart of the Redlands of Lembron, a noticeably different valley has been carved out. Streaming down to these parts, the water from the peaks once penetrated this land of glowing red clays to leave magnificent breaches and natural sculptures. This scenery is full of bizarre pyramids reaching up to 30 meters in height. This succession of towers evokes a procession of monks, which is how the Valley of the Saints got its name. Eroded by water and wind, it shapes beautiful columns in the landscape, also known as the fairy chimneys. They owe their colorful ornamentation to the oxidized minerals they are made of. Depending on their geological composition, each of the chimneys completes its pink palette with shades of ochre, mauve, green, or white. These sumptuous gradients are not visible anywhere else and contrast sharply with the park's characteristic large plains covered in meadows. With very little rainfall, this arid terrain has a very Colorado-like feel to it. The fragile beauty of these rocks, sculpted by the hand of nature, will not last forever. Ephemeral, they are doomed to disappear with the natural erosion of the landscape. The vegetation of this reddish labyrinth is dominated by pine and oak trees. By taking the path along the ridges, perched a little upstream, a panorama offers a supernatural viewpoint of these flaming shades of ochre. In the secret corners of Auvergne, where time dances to the slow rhythm of the seasons, an ethereal landscape reveals itself untouched by crowds of tourists. Here, every gust of wind whispers a melody reserved for those who dare to venture off the beaten track. The soul of nature lies in these timeless corners, where silence becomes a precious ally, weaving a magical web of isolation far from the hustle and bustle of cities. In Auvergne, escape is not just an act, but a communion with tranquility, where intrepid travelers can lose themselves only to find themselves again in the heart of an unspoiled paradise, away from overly inquisitive eyes. The volcanoes, millennia-old artists of the earth, have shaped our landscapes. As guardians of our region's heritage, these mountains steeped in geological legends tell a priceless story. In the palpable urgency of climate change, where nature is tested daily, the preservation of natural sanctuaries such as the Auvergne volcanoes is a major imperative. These majestic peaks, silent witnesses to the passing of time, remind us of the essence of our link with nature, a fragile pact that is essential for our future.